Hello and welcome to the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. I am Julian, your host, humble narrator, cult master extraordinaire, dirty ass Mexican. I got a lot of names. A little dated what I'm about to say, being that we are 2 weeks into January, but regardless, I hope everyone out there listening to this had a great holiday season and New Year's with you and your loved ones. I, along with, many others, had a very low-key Christmas. Last year was very trying and very different for a lot of people. But I will say that since March, when this whole thing started, I lost 40 pounds, which is cool. But in the span of a couple hours on Christmas Eve, with a giant plate of tamales in front of me, I gained it all back easily. Oh, without question. At the very least, a significant portion of those 40 pounds were given right back to me, which is great. Still reeling from the aftermath of that. But, I mean, you want to ask me if I regret it? That was spectacular. Had the plate of tamales there, the sour cream and the salsa and the lettuce. Oh, my goodness. Hijo de su puta madre. I'm going on a tangent now. But 2 weeks into January and 1 day late, the DualShock Graveyard Podcast is ready to rock. With the first episode of 2021... Wait, hang on. Let's try that again. We're back with the first episode of 2021. Your boy got himself a soundboard over the holidays. Let me repeat that. Your boy got himself a soundboard over the holidays. Which is awesome and also a lie because I don't have a soundboard. That was me holding my phone right over the mic because your host is a cheapskate. Your host is a cheapskate. As a matter of fact, me being a cheapskate is actually the topic of today's show. This is a very special episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. Very untraditional. This is the first ever State of the Graveyard. And on this State of the Graveyard, well, first let me explain what these types of podcasts are. It's a very common podcast trope where one of the firsts... Sometimes it's the first episode of the year or the last episode of the year. You'll have your host, me in this case, giving a very basic overview on where the show is, what's going on behind the scenes, and what the audience can expect in the year 2021. So that's basically what this episode's going to be. There's not going to be any weekly releases, no what I've been playing, what I've been watching, no topics on the issue of horror, no gaming news. No, it's going to be a lot less structured and, albeit most likely pretty brief. Most likely very brief, as a matter of fact. First of all, I'm doing this just to see if I even remember how to do this. And for a second there, I almost didn't. You should have seen me yesterday. This episode should have come out a day earlier, but I was going through a, shocker, another bout of technical difficulties and was losing my mind. And by the time I figured out what was going on, my mood was already so jacked that I couldn't possibly in good confidence do a very positive, cheery episode when I was not in a positive, cheery mood. So here we are 1 day later, ready to go. And I must say I'm actually quite grateful for these types of episodes too, because it gives me the opportunity to, I don't want to use the word relaunch per se, but it gives me the opportunity to reintroduce what I do here to what I assume, given that this is a brand new year, it's been a couple weeks, a majority brand new audience, which is pretty great. If this is your first time listening to the DualShock Graveyard, let me start by welcoming you. And before I even begin to explain what I do here, understand that the foundation of everything that's done here is the listeners. One of the biggest, for lack of a better term, mission statements, if you will, of this podcast is, I don't know, I always thought about how cool it would be to start a community of like-minded people who love horror and love gaming. And that's what the DualShock Graveyard is. The DualShock, I say this every single week on every single show, the DualShock Graveyard is a gaming podcast with a horror twist. I've been saying that every single week since, I'd say, about episode 3. I call that line the lament, or the show's declaration. So like when I'm scripting out an episode and I'm, going about what I'm going to talk about, I'll just throw in like, okay, here's the part where you lament. and I throw in that line. One of the first things I'm going to change about this show is that actual line because it's, well, simply it can be worded better. It's more than just a gaming podcast with a horror twist. If anything, lately it's actually been the opposite. It's more of a horror podcast with a gaming twist. And in that, I'll go ahead and admit that that's actually one of the issues that I've been having, well, issues with. And that's that gaming is very easy to talk about because it's very concentrated and it's much easier to outline gaming news and organize what's going on in the industry to talk about in a podcast format. Very easy. However, I didn't want to just be a gaming podcast because there's so many of those out there. There's so many gaming podcasts. And in this day and age where podcasting is so much more accessible, which is a good thing. Like it's a good thing. Like I'd say podcasting and filmmaking. A lot of people say that filmmaking is a lot more accessible. I'm sure it's substantially a little more difficult, but the barrier to entry is so much lower than it was many years ago, and podcasting even more so. I mean, just get yourself a mic. Not even a mic. You can start a podcast with your phone, which is actually how I started the DualShock Graveyard podcast. It wasn't until episode 3 or 4 that I actually got a legit mic. Before that, I've been using the voice recorder app on my phone and was able to put out 2 episodes, which is great. Which is I think is a good thing. But the only downside to that is now that there's so many podcasts out there, the challenge is now sticking out and trying to do something different. And that's what I attempted to do by starting a podcast that not only was about gaming, but was about another thing that I have a really strong passion for, and that's the genre of horror. And not just the genre in the sense of like a media, but just in general, just everything that has to do with anything that's scary. And that's where I started having trouble because, like I said, gaming is very easy to talk about, but quote unquote, talking about horror is a little more tricky. And that's because horror is such a spectacularly broad subject. I mean, obviously horror movies, but then you've also got paranormal stuff, urban legends, curses, myths, um, human nature, and the fucked up things that humans can do. And because I hadn't given much thought to how I can pinpoint that, I've been taking, I don't want to say the easy road, but I mean, sure, like it's basically just become recommending horror movies and then talking about gaming, which I want it to be so much more. And that's actually something that I've been working on improving. Um, as a matter of fact, I have a variety of topics that I have written down here that is in that variety. And to give a little sneak peek into next week's first full-blown episode of the DualShock Graveyard podcast, we will be talking about the man known as the Bjork Stalker. Very brief sneak peek because I really just want to save everything for next week's episode. But for those that don't know, the Bjork Stalker is one of the most disturbing examples of a deranged man who had a obsession with the singer Bjork. He was not well in the head, and he bought himself a video camera, which he uses as his own personal video diary. And through these video diaries, you see the descent into madness that this man goes through. And that makes me very, very excited for next week to be talking about that. It's a subject that intrigues me quite well. I mean, I'm really into that. I'm into anything that's spooky, anything that's disturbing. There's something intriguing about the want to be scared. You know, the chase that we go as horror fans to be freaked out. That intrigues me. And going down these rabbit holes of deranged individuals like the Bjork Stalker is always very interesting subject matter to me. Now, that's the horror portion of the show. Like I said, it's getting a lot easier for me to get a lock on the range of topics that I could be talking about when it comes to horror because, again, it is a very spectacularly broad thing. I'll call it a thing because I don't want to call it a genre because genre implies that I'm sticking to like the media portion of it, but I'm not. I'm horror, just the whatever of horror. And after we talk about horror for a while, that's there's a portion of the show where we segue on over to gaming, which once again, nothing really much is going to change there. Usually I start the segment by what I call the weekly releases, which I'm going to come up with new names of all these subjects. I think it's very basic. and it's also quite self-explanatory. It's just every game that's coming out that week, followed by just a roundup of all the latest happening in the world of all the latest happenings rather in the world of gaming. And that brings me to another reason why I didn't just want to do a just another gaming podcast. Much like podcasts that talk about um, current events and the news, gaming podcasts also have the curse of being outdated as soon as the episode's done. Weeks go by, those episodes aren't really episodes that you can go back and just listen to because it's just going to be filled with outdated gaming news from weeks ago or months ago. And I have had episodes that have been majority gaming news centric, and all of those are now outdated. I'd say the first 6 episodes were like that. And it wasn't until I relaunched the show the first time where I understood that and wanted to include content that wouldn't go outdated. I want to make like a catalog of episodes that you can just choose one and get something out of it, something new that you didn't know before, such as learning more about the Bjork Stalker or my thoughts on the movie The Thing, which I watched for the first time recently. And Jesus Christ, that's something else we're going to talk about next week. And yeah, just a full catalog of episodes like that, which is also the reason why I switched the format to where it used to be I would talk about gaming first and then horror, but I since switched that because horror is a much more accessible topic. If I had to take a wild guess, I think there's a lot more people that are interested just generally in the topic of horror than they are about gaming. And I want our mutual love for both those topics to bring us together. But horror is the much more attractive, subject matter. Also, for those that don't know, the DualShock Graveyard podcast started 2 years ago, and I believe we're 16 episodes in. So you're probably scratching your heads wondering how that's possible. Well, let me explain what happened there. Okay, so I started the show 2 years ago. Wanted to start a podcast, so I did, and just as I started, just learning how everything went. And it wasn't until episode 7, I think, was the last one. And then I put that out, and I had a career change in my personal life, as well as a couple other things that happened that ended up. I originally wanted to take like a week off, and that turned into 2 weeks, which then turned into a month, which eventually snowballed into 2 whole years, which is unfortunate and was not my intention at all. But fast forward to April of 2020, and we all know. I mean, come on. I mean, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but quarantine started, and early on, I decided to do a lot of changes in my life, a lot of positive changes. Now that I had the time, and even during those 2 years that I had stopped doing the show, I would think about eventually getting back to it because, like I said, I enjoyed doing the show. I enjoy doing the show. I enjoy talking about horror and gaming. And I mean, talk about a golden opportunity, right? So I decided to do so. I invested a whole bunch of money to equipment, software, and really wanted to do it right this time. And hence, what was it October? I want to say October is when the big relaunch, episode 8, which I believe is entitled Resurrection, aptly named because it was the big resurrection of the show. And here we are to this day, kicking ass still. And this perfectly jeez, I think that's the second time I've made that error. And that segues into something else that I want to do this year. A little bit ago, I talked about me in the beginning of quarantine making many life improving decisions. Um, Among starting the relaunching the podcast, some other things that I did was um, I started running for the first time on a consistent basis for the first time, which was really nice. I started taking dieting more seriously, among other things. But one of them is something that I stopped doing, and I want to dedicate a whole episode to what I stopped doing and the benefits that I received from ceasing this activity that greatly improved my life. And I want to share that with you. I want to share my personal experience from abstaining from this, um, and the benefits I got from it. And it's a topic that interests me a lot. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of um, personal experience behind it, and it's been among all the other positive things I've done in my life. This is one of the biggest, for sure. That's just done tremendous work for my mental health, and has just made me a happier person overall. And again, it's a topic that interests me very much. And again, I'm not going to tell you what it is. If you're that curious, you're more than welcome, like always, to reach out to me at Twitter and Instagram. Although my Instagram is currently temporarily retired, I will be bringing that very shortly. Um, the main communication hubs of the DualShock Graveyard podcast for now will be my Twitter page at ambient_jules. Um, Big shout out to everyone that has been reaching out through the Twitter and the Instagram page throughout the past year. Getting to know you guys on a basis beyond just just as a listener has been pretty cool, and I hope you guys continue to do so. Another plan that I have for this year is I want to eventually start branching off into video content. For those that don't know, I do have a YouTube channel. It's mainly just to, broadcast another outlet among other outlets that broadcast the show. I don't want to be a YouTuber, however, it's not gonna be that deep, no. And any video content that I make from the show will be strictly labeled DualShock Graveyard web exclusive content. But I think that'd be pretty cool. I have a couple video topics in mind. Planning on taking some content that I talk about on the show and just expand on it further in video form, just get in front of a camera and just reach a new audience and broadcast DualShock Graveyard material just in a different format is actually kind of cool. What else? Oh, this is more of a short-term thing that I want to do. I do definitely want to get new artwork for the show. That is for sure. I still cringe every time I look at the I have to look at that podcast art template. I remember where I was when I made that. I was before the first ever episode. I was sketching everything out, and I was in Concord, California at a Starbucks. And the podcast, to submit one, you need art to submit to the RSS feed. So I remember downloading a logo making app, which I believe was called Logo Maker, and I whipped together very cheaply. I have zero art skills whatsoever, so I just chose a template and just in big, bold red letters just wrote the DualShock Graveyard podcast, and there it was. And there it stands to this day, which makes me cringe every time I see it. So, speaking of making investments to the show, one investment that I'm very excited to do is head out and hire an artist to sketch out some art for me. I have some concepts written down, and it'll be very exciting to see what we come up with, so we can replace that horrendous piece of podcast art that's on every episode. And among the random shenanigans that I do have planned for 2021, moving forward, I think it would be appropriate to cap off this this State of the Graveyard, this very short, very brief, where are we type episode, with something else to look forward to this year. And it's this giant list I have of every substantial game coming out this year. A lot of these aren't confirmed. I mean, they're confirmed for at least this year. This is actually every substantial game that's coming out this year and beyond. So, and this list is done through extensive research. So I might be missing some big ones, but as far as I know, this is every substantial one at the very least. And starting with Far Cry 6, Halo Infinite, Dying Light 2, Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga, Hitman 3, Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time remake, Little Nightmares 2, Super Mario 3D World for the Switch, Braid Remastered, Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, Gotham Knights, Grand Theft Auto 5 for the next-gen consoles, Horizon 2, The Forbidden West, Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil Village, Rocksteady's Suicide Squad game, Overwatch 2, the System Shock remake, Gran Turismo 7, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Elden Ring, The Elder Scrolls 6, which I'm going to take a guess and just assume that is definitely not going to come out this year. Um, Avowed, Hellblade 2, Fable, new Pokemon Snap, the next Skate game, Psychonauts 2, Dragon Age 4, Skull and Bones, which we haven't heard a thing about in years, God of War Ragnarok, Final Fantasy 16, Hogwarts Legacy, Rider Republic, Kena Bridge of Spirits, Lord of the Ring Gollum, Metroid Prime 4, Payday 3, the next Bioshock game, the next Kevin Levine game, currently untitled, Diablo 4, Forza Motorsport, the reboot, Destruction All Stars, Project Athea, which is that Square Enix title that was shown off during the latest PlayStation showcase. Bethesda's Starfield, Bayonetta 3, Black Myth Wukong, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, Mass Effect Remastered Trilogy, plus the next Mass Effect game, the AEW game, and IO's recently announced James Bond game. Wow. That is quite a lot to look forward to as far as on the gaming front. Just a little platter of games to be excited for to wrap up this State of the Union. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I really do mean that on an individual level. If you took the time out to listen to the whole episode, thank you so much. I'm very excited for this year. Next week's episode in particular, the first full, fat, chunky, thick episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast, I'm excited for. Once again, we will be talking about the Bjork Stalker, so stay tuned for that. I'm already getting that scripted out as we speak. And this show is also your show, so please reach out to the current communication hubs of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast, which is my Twitter page and my Instagram. I'm at @ambient_Jules. And that's all I got for this week. Appreciate you guys once again, and be safe, take care out there, and I'll catch you guys next week. Goodbye, everybody. And remember, DualShock is a product. Yeah, fuck that up. Jesus Christ. I'm not even going to edit that out. I'm just going to let it sit there. It's the end of the episode anyway. Who cares? DualShock is a product of Sony.